Hello and welcome to another History Online video tutorial. Today we're going to look at some top-level skills around Elizabeth's marriage and succession. So thank you for joining me with this little lesson today. We're going to be looking at Elizabeth's marriage and succession, and we'll be focusing on some top-level interpretation skills. This will be one of the key questions you'll come across in your exam, and it'll be worth 8 marks. So we're going to be doing today a little vision quiz around the topic, of course, of marriage and succession. And then we'll look at one of our interpretations and we'll discuss how to answer questions successfully and work through an example answer. So now over to the quiz. So here we are with our quiz, and there are 7 questions. And do you know your facts? So let's find out. You need to know your facts to be really successful at this topic. If you don't know your facts particularly well, you look at these questions wondering, I don't know any of these, then have a look at the link. I'll add it in now. I'll put it above me somewhere around here to one of my revision videos. So give that a go and see if we can remind your knowledge on Elizabeth. Also, in the notes, have a look at my Quizlet cards to help you revise this topic a little bit more. So as ever, pause me and have a go at this quiz. Either write the answers or just have a think about them. Away you go. So what about the answers then? Let's give them a go. So why was Cecil most concerned about marriage? Well, he needed to secure the Tudor succession. He needed to make sure that Elizabeth had an heir to the throne, and obviously only a legitimate heir can come through by marriage. So not having an heir was going to cause lots of problems for Elizabeth. It was going to cause her a crisis in many respects with Mary, Queen of Scots, that Elizabeth was not secure on the throne, and Mary, Queen of Scots was a rival to the throne. Secondly, which English noble was considered for Elizabeth to marry? Robert Dudley, of course. This was the person who had proposed to her in the 1570s at Kenilworth Castle. But obviously she rejected the proposal. There was rumours around Robert Dudley, which we'll come to in a minute. Name the French person, the older person that Elizabeth considered marrying. Well, Francis, Duke of Anjou, of course, which Elizabeth rejected, and there was problems around that, being the fact that he was Catholic was a big problem. But you may be aware in your wider knowledge that there was the French War of Religions going on, and around about this time there was the St. Bartholomew Days massacre, which was where the Catholics went around slaughtering Protestants. So she could not marry a Protestant slaughtering prince. Give one reason why Elizabeth did not marry Robert Dudley. Well, here we are then. So it was rumoured that Robert Dudley had killed his wife. Perhaps she'd fallen down the stairs, of course. And that gives you another reason why Elizabeth couldn't marry her. And the early reason, of course, being that he was already married. Second reason, of course, maybe not so good marrying somebody who'd already been married. And thirdly, being English, and Elizabeth had risen him up through the ranks as he was the favourite. Other lords would become jealous. It could cause rebellious behaviour. Number 5, and now Philip of Spain did propose to Elizabeth quite early on. Why did she not marry him? Well, he was Catholic, of course, and Philip had shown when he was married to Mary, Elizabeth's sister, that Philip would like to be in charge. Maybe Elizabeth didn't want to share the throne with him. And finally, of course, if you take the Henry VIII sort of argument about divorce of Catherine of Aragon, that you should not be marrying your sister or brother's partner. So that's maybe in the thinking as well. Number 6, who broke the parliamentary ban on discussing Elizabeth's marriage? So Elizabeth got very frustrated by pressure to marry, particularly from Parliament and from the council. And so she banned Parliament talking about marriage, and Peter Wentworth was sent to the Tower by Parliament themselves for breaking the ban on marriage, particularly as we look on question 7, how they got rather concerned about it. So question 7, in 1566, people became more concerned about Elizabeth getting married. Why? Well, she caught smallpox, and there was a fear with Mary, Queen of Scots starting to emerge on the scene that there'd be a war between Catholics and Protestants if Elizabeth should die, about who would be the succession, because it wasn't clear who was going to be king or queen next, and maybe people didn't want Mary, Queen of Scots. Okay, well, I hope you were successful with your quiz. And remember, if maybe you weren't, then do look at my revision videos on this topic. Now, let's look at some interpretation skills. Here we are then. Here is our question. And here's the wording of it first. And we're going to look at the theme of how convincing. Okay, these question one interpretation questions normally, or should do, start with the phrase how convincing is interpretation A. And then it's about a particular topic. So in this case, how convincing is interpretation A about the reasons why Elizabeth did not marry? Explain why using the interpretation and your knowledge. Okay, so this fits nicely with the topic we're doing about marriage and succession. Now, what is an interpretation? So this is not a primary source. This is not a source from the time period. This is now a modern view, like a phrase, a secondary source from a non-fiction book. So a historian's view in a book or a website. It could be a picture. It could be written. So if the picture would not be an eyewitness picture, it'd be a picture from a modern book, recreating the ideas from the time based on their knowledge. So we have to decide, is this viewpoint, is this argument from the modern time convincing? And we can only do that, obviously, using some knowledge. And that's why I asked you to use knowledge in the question. So the interpretation then is this here. So interpretation A, it's a view of Elizabeth's marriage problem from a modern history teacher. So, it says, Elizabeth had a duty to her country to marry for the best political reasons. She could not marry for mere love. However, there were no good political matches that would maintain religious peace in her land, keep peace and the balance of power in Europe, and would keep the nobles from quarrelling at home. The safest journey in the end was marriage to England. Okay, so what do we got to do to be successful in this question? So we need to identify two key viewpoints for the interpretations to assess. Not opinions in there, not facts. What two opinions has it got about Elizabeth's marriage? Not facts. Facts you can't argue about. Opinions you can argue about. Okay, we need two because we need one per paragraph, of course. 2 paragraphs like normal. So for each viewpoint, assess how correct it is using our normal Peel paragraphs. And then thirdly, no conclusion needed. Simply make sure that your argument is very clear in your point sentences and in your explanation phases to complete this. Okay, so let's now have a think about some arguments. So, if you like, pause the screen, read back through, see if you can find some arguments. We're looking for 2, 1 for each paragraph, remember. So maybe pause me and have a go at that. All right, here are some arguments then. Well, there were no good matches, firstly, is one argument. Well, you might want to argue that. Maybe there were good matches. Maybe there are people she could marry. Secondly, there were no good matches due to noble reasons. Okay, so no good matches, firstly, the first one due to religious reasons, and no good matches due to, noble problems at court. So these were 2 reasons. And I guess we're starting to think about candidates we can start to argue about, perhaps. So we said in our success criteria we need knowledge to do that. So can you think of some knowledge? Maybe you've got a different argument to me, and that's fine. Maybe you're arguing that maybe it was the duty of her country. Maybe the safest journey was not to marry. Okay, you could argue those opinions, of course. Can you think of some knowledge to argue your view is your next thing. So in the exam, you've underlined your opinions, your 2 ideas. You're just going to bullet point a couple of ideas next to it as a little plan. So what knowledge could you use? Have a think now. So hopefully you had a good think. So what knowledge have we got then? So I've got for number 1, religious peace, obviously. Yes, this would keep religious peace if she didn't marry Philip and Duke of Anjou, because obviously they were both Catholic. It would ruin her middle way. Okay, that's an important bit of knowledge. You can start talking about religion here, middle way. See how actually we have to draw in other topics into this. We can't just talk about marriage. We can talk about religion or rebellions and wider knowledge. Of course, that wider knowledge about the French wars of religion is important. The second point, marriages to a noble could cause problems at court. Yes, she married Robert Dudley. It was very controversial. Mysterious death of his wife. He was a Protestant. Obviously, there were Catholics in court, particularly some of the Northern Earls, as we know from things like the Northern Rebellion. Also, we know Norfolk was Catholic. And of course, a bit of wide knowledge again. Cecil was against it because Dudley's father had been a traitor. Okay, now, yes, this was a traitor to Mary, so maybe to Protestants it seemed like loyalty, but still a traitor nevertheless to the Queen because of her faith. So some important things to consider. So we'd have a little underline these themes, have a little bullet point plan, and we're ready to go with our answer. So how do we do this then? So we don't want to do our points as normal. So interpretation is partly or very convincing because we want to give our evidence. For example, it says, and we want to explain. This is convincing because, and can I really encourage you to make sure you use that phrase, this is convincing because, to develop your argument. It can become very much like a sort of bit of a wishy-washy discussion about the extract if you're not talking about whether it's convincing or not. Candidates might forget to give their knowledge and just start sort of rambling on about the extract without actually going, this is convincing because, and then setting up your argument about why it's convincing. As soon as you start saying this is convincing because, you're going to give me an opinion and you're going to back that with knowledge. So that's going to lead to a stronger answer. Remember, you might say it's partly convincing, so you can say however. However, this is only partly convincing because, and explain with obviously an opinion, a bit of knowledge. Or you might think it's very convincing, you might say furthermore, it is convincing as, and explain a further idea. Okay, so let's give this a go. So what would you make as your opening point then? Pause me and have a go. What would be your opening point, folks? Okay, here's an opening point then. So interpretation is very convincing because Elizabeth did struggle to marry due to religious problems. All right, I've just repeated the question back and said religious problems. So now I'm going to pick out a bit of content from the extract to back this up. So where is the religious problem bit in there? So back it up, give it a go, folks. Add that to your answer. So evidence, for example, it states she could not get a good political match due to religious differences. Okay, so I haven't copied out the whole extract. I've just given a quick summary in one sentence. I haven't got lots of time for this. I need to write this paragraph in 4 or 5 minutes. So I can't spend all my time writing out the extract. Now, I don't want to talk about the extract again at all in terms of copying bits from it. I now just want to explain this is convincing because with my knowledge. So pause again and see if you can do the next bit. Doesn't matter if you're doing a different idea to me, just give it a go. Have a practice. Right, so here we are. Let's have a look at the knowledge. So this is convincing because, sorry, I went too far there. This is convincing because Philip of Spain and the Duke of Anjou would have created powerful political alliances, but she could not marry them as they were Catholic. In particular, during the match to Anjou, the French were killing Protestants due to the French wars of religion. Okay. So now we're thinking of furthermore. We think this is very convincing. We've written that at the top. So we do need that furthermore idea. So you might be doing a different idea with a however. So what you're going to do is your next bit of knowledge. Okay. I haven't talked about wider ideas here with religion, have I? So that might be a bit of a hint to you. Away you go. Give it a go. So finally, furthermore, it is convincing as marrying a Catholic would ruin the religious middle way Elizabeth was trying to create for religious peace in the country. So I've now linked to the middle way. I feel maybe could do a little bit more knowledge there, perhaps, but got to also be timely in the exam. You can't spend your time explaining everything in lots and lots and lots of detail. So there we are. There's an example paragraph for you. Now give it a go with the second extract. Now, if you need to come back and look at this, and obviously just click back to this as an example and give the second paragraph a go. So we've got this message number 2 about the nobles. Got a little bit of knowledge there at the bottom we've planned out. Got our writing frame here on the right. So maybe have a pause and give it a go. All right. So I hope you found today's lesson really useful and you've been able to develop your top grade interpretation skills and had a little practice yourself with that extract. In your textbooks and revision guides, there are extracts that you can practice with. And of course, you can possibly go to websites that have extracts in them. Things like Spartacus Education come to mind, and John D. Clare come to mind with extracts and interpretations in them. Or literally, you can be thinking as you look over revision websites like BBC Bitesize, that is also an interpretation, of course. It's a secondary interpretation of the events. You can think about, oh, is this convincing? Have they, and think about your knowledge about whether you believe the idea that's in there. So get practicing on your interpretation skills, and I shall see you soon. Bye-bye.